Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another story time with MLSF. My name is Brianna Mark Sterling. I am an ambassador for MLSF and I am also a junior at Florida Atlantic University. And I hope that today you are ready to talk about how the wealth, the Black dollar, and the community of Black wealth and the Black dollar is not new. This is not something that has started in the past 20 years, the past 100 years. Today, we're going to talk about Mansa Musa, one of the richest person to ever walk the earth. So I hope that you are encouraged as we read the story, that you are in tuned, and we go into this together. So we'll go here. So the history topic is Mansa Musa, which is from 1280 to 1337. And he was one of the rulers of the Mali Empire. In the 14th century, if you wanted to find one of the richest empires in the world, you wouldn't have looked in Europe. Instead, you would have traveled to West Africa and the Mali Empire. This empire, covering hundreds of thousands of miles, owned huge amounts of gold. Its land is now part of several modern countries, including Mali, Senegal, Guinea, Mauritania, Gambia, Burkina Faso, and Ivory Coast, among others. The empire became known outside Africa after the travels of one of its greatest leaders, Mansa Musa, who later became one of the inspirations for Marvel's Black Panther and Wakanda. Over here in this corner, there's actually a map of Africa, and you can see where Mali is, stretching all the way to Senegal, and that is quite the amount of land. How did the Mali Empire begin? Like many empires before and since, the Mali Empire began with conquest. The story is told by the poem of the epic Sundiata. Sundiata Keita was the founder of the Mali Empire. Sundiata was the son of the king of the Makinda people, and a prophecy said he would become a great emperor. But when his father passed away, the throne was taken by his brother. He went into exile at the court of the king of Nima, who made him one of his key advisors. Meanwhile, the Soso Empire conquered the Mandinka people, and the Mandinka people asked Sundiata to help them. Still only 18, he raised an army from Mima, and around 1235, he won a great victory at the Battle of Kurana. Sundiata was named Mansa of a new Mali empire, nicknamed the Lion King because of his success in battle. And he conquered many other lands, turning his kingdom into a mighty new empire. So essentially, so many people came before, and one day a prophecy was told that he would become great. He went to battle and conquered tons and tons and tons of people and was named the Lion King, and he was named emperor, so he got some of the biggest promotions ever, and he turned his kingdom into an empire. How did the Mali Empire work? In general, empires are usually conquered by people. You expand your empire by conquering land, and you grow and expand, and you take care of those people, you adapt them, then you go out again and you conquer some more land. So essentially, that's what he did for a really long time. So Sundiata called a great assembly, the Gabara, and every clan sent a representative. So all the little towns sent a representative to speak on their behalf. They were talking about laws that would govern the empire for centuries, that would prevent the mistreatment of slaves and prisoners, clear laws stating who owned which land, and the prices were fixed for goods, so they knew how much they were paying, they knew what belonged to them, and they started to structure democracy and build a civilization. So there's a picture of Mansa Musa. The land of the Mali Empire was rich in resources. The Mali Empire contained 3 large gold mines, and all the gold belonged to the Mansa. At its peak, the empire had almost half the known world's gold. So half the gold in the entire world belonged to the Mali Empire. They also had large copper mines and reserves, and they were worked by slaves. And all of this turned the Mali Empire into a trading hub where people could exchange not only the natural resources and the jewels of the earth, but they could also build commerce around that. So they had large supplies of salt, and salt was very valuable in Africa because of desert countries where you might not be able to have things and you could preserve your food. And very it was very rare in some parts of Africa. So some people didn't have much access to it at all. So it could be worth even more in some parts than the other. And they made a fortune from the trade of salt. So they have all of these gold mines, they have copper, they had slaves, they had salts, they had it all going on. Sundiata died around 1255, and his son, Ali Kita, built trading links with the Middle East. After he passed away, his adopted brothers began a civil war that ended in 1275 after they died. And the Gabara chose the men they felt best suited to be Mansa for the next 35 years. And they wanted very well for the Mansas to grow and become more rich and more powerful. So even though they had expanded and conquered and had so much value, they wanted more. And that is amazing. In 1310, Mansa Abubakari Keita II was crowned. He was fascinated by exploration and dreamed of finding new lands across the Atlantic Ocean. And in 1311, he abdicated the throne to lead an expedition of 2,000 ships across the sea. He never returned, although some reported he found the New World and chose to remain there. If he did, it was over 165 years before the Christopher Columbus voyage. So there's a possibility that Mansa Musa came to America before Christopher Columbus and explored and tested the waters and went back. So, who was Mansa Musa? Mansa Musa I was chosen as his successor. Musa conquered 24 new cities and their territories and added them to the empire. During his reign, the gold mines were at their most productive, as all the gold belonged to the Mansa Musa, might be the richest man in history. All the gold belonged to one person. Some experts have suggested that in today's money, he would have had nearly $400 billion. This is more money than Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates put together. Black people are not new to this. They are true to this. Musa wasn't a great ruler because he was rich. He was wise and generous. He made the empire wealthier and more powerful than it had ever been before. He promoted trade, education, and building. He was a patron of the arts and a devout Muslim. He believed it was his duty to make his empire powerful, peaceful, and prosperous. He also believed it was his duty to convert the empire to Islam, which in some cases he did by force. However, Musa also continued to allow slavery in his empire and owned thousands of slaves himself, many of them in the mines that produced his wealth. So he was kind to his people. He persuaded people to participate in the Islamic religion. He also wanted people to be educated. He wanted them to know how to do things and provide value to his empire. He also would have slaves, many of them in the mines that produced his wealth. So those same mines that we were saying had so much gold and so much copper and so much salt and resources. He went and had slaves working and tending to that. So this is a picture of him on the Catalan Atlas on his journey to Mecca to make the Mali Empire more popular in Europe. So cool. So here, Mansa Musa is improving the empire. That is the Dijing. I'm not going to try to pronounce that, you guys, but this is a mosque built by his people in Mali. Musa built mosques and madrases, an Arabic word for educational building like a school, across his realm. He improved the living conditions of his cities. He built a grand hall of audience in his palace, and the window frames were plated with gold. Musa hired architects from Spain to plan some of his buildings because money was no problem. So if he wanted it, he had it. In Timbuktu, which Musa added to the empire in 1325, he completely changed the city. He built the world famous Dijinguerer Mosque, which still stands today. He also founded the city of Sankor, the University of Sankor. This became one of the greatest centers of Islamic learning in the world. Experts in law, astronomy, and medicine taught there. By the end of Musa's reign, it had 25,000 students and was one of the largest libraries in the world with over 1 million manuscripts. Musa turned the Mali Empire, and Timbuktu in particular, into a major trading site. Traders from across Africa, the Islamic world, and many European cities like Venice traded there. So he not only built up schools, he built up mosques. People came there from all over to study law, astronomy, and medicine. This was one of the greatest universities in the world. He had libraries. People could go there to learn and historize the world. And he turned it into like this booming economy in like prehistoric times to us. This is not 2000. This is in 1324. And he had people from all over the world coming to trade. He literally had the greatest empire in the world for a really long time. Mansa Musa was one of the first African rulers to travel to the Middle East. In 1324, Musa traveled on a pilgrimage to Mecca, the most holy city in Islam. The journey was over 4,000 miles, and he did not travel light. He took 60,000 men, including 12,000 slaves, thousands of caravans, horses, and camels, and an almost unimaginably huge amount of gold. So he was rolling in the deep to Mecca. He had all these people, all these resources. He was not going to make this trip anything less than a big deal. Everyone had to know he was coming. Musa wanted the journey to make his empire known to the whole world. As he traveled, he made gifts of gold to the poor. That's what Jesus did. In Egypt, he gave away so much gold, its value actually went down. Eyewitnesses he met along the way were dumbstruck by his wealth and power. Suddenly, the whole world became aware of the Mali Empire. It started to appear on international maps, and traders from across the Mediterranean made their way there. So they were like, OMG, someone is walking around handing out gold. This man has so much gold, he can literally stabilize and destabilize an economy, feed hungry children. He gave everything to poor people. He walked and said what he had to say, kept going, and became like an internet sensation in that time. So he literally put his city on the map, on international maps at that. And then the pilgrimage turned the Mali Empire into a major power and also helped bring new architects and influences into the empire to help support Mansa Musa's building plans. They wanted this place to expand. If this is where the world is going to make money, let's make it as big as possible. So everyone went there because that was their shot at expanding their empire, and having a stable economy grow is what Mansa Musa lived for. The Mali Empire after Mansa Musa. Musa died at some point around 1337. He was followed by his son, who wasted much of his wealth, and then by his brother Suleiman in 1341. Suleiman had to rebuild the treasury. He was called the miser compared to his brother, so he was cheap. But he helped the empire to flourish. The Islamic writer Abu Abdallah ibn Battuta traveled through the empire during his reign, and the book he wrote of his experiences was widely read. However, after the Mansas were less successful, from 1389, tyrants, bad Mansas, and civil wars led to the Mali Empire growing weaker. It lost control of much of its land, resources, and the trade empire shrank. The Mali Empire didn't last, but at its height, it was one of the richest, most powerful empires the world has ever seen. So nothing lasts forever, but the good salvation. Long story short, his son squandered his money. Like, this is why we should listen to our parents. His son squandered so much of his money. His brother came in and was like, you guys are going to be on a very strict budget. Everyone called him cheap. Everyone was upset and they didn't like it, but it helped the empire to flourish. And not only did he stabilize the empire, it flourished. It almost went back to normal. So after them, really bad people came in and took power, and some people want to help and be of influence, and some people just want to get all that they can from a position of power. So they lost everything. A lot of their land got taken back and reconquered. If they even put up a fight, the resources were drained. People came and got what they could at a really good price, or they stole it, or they killed for it, and they took it and ran. And then their trade shrank. The resources are draining, so people aren't coming there anymore because there's nothing there. So while it didn't last, it was one of the richest and most powerful empires in the world. Why some of the discussion points that we can go over today start with why we think the Mali Empire became so strong. And if we go back into page 2, we see here that they chose war. At the end of the day, they started expanding this empire by divide and conquer. They had armies all over, and they had ships that traveled out and they conquered land. But they also had lots of resources, lots of gold, lots of copper, salt. So they built commerce. They built an economy for themselves, and they were self-sufficient. They had everything that they needed, and they went out and gave it to other people. They did very well for themselves. The empire started in conquest, but why do you think it lasted as long as it did? Again, because of their economy. They were able to stabilize themselves and depend on their resources, and they were able to start trading and expanding their territory. So the more that they put out, the more that they actually got in. People continued to come through there. They were able to circulate money and build an economy, a very stable and thriving economy at that. The Gabala and the local governors had a lot of responsibility in the Mali Empire. Why do you think this helped the empire to grow? So we can go back to where they talked about electing people. Every clan sent a representative. So they had a democracy. The people came together and they said, we want you to go speak on our behalf. The laws were agreed that they would govern the empire for centuries. They had stability. They said, okay, if there's going to be taxes, it's going to be taxes, 10% every year, and that was it. They fixed the price for goods throughout the empire. So nothing was going to be any more, any less, no surprises. You can make as much money as you want, but you can be guaranteed that you only have to spend this much. So they created a system of law and order. They had a law of the land. They had rules and regulations that they had to abide by because they created a democracy and created in a sort of constitution. They were able to function in a means of, they weren't savages. They weren't crazy. They were not unable. They were very smart. They came together and they created a government. Abubakari Keita II sailed to the New World. Do you think he might have found it? What would it mean for world history if he did? So, US history tells us that Christopher Columbus was the first person to come here and discover America. So when he came here, there were Indians, which we now know as Native Americans. And if Abubakari Keita II went through world history and found the New World before Christopher Columbus, it would just simply mean that Christopher Columbus was not the first person to discover America. So that would mean that Abubakari may have came here and saw Native Americans here first, or he came here and brought the Native Americans here, left some of them, and returned back to his empire on the other side of the world. So it would change a lot of factors of what history, of world history. This would be more than hypothetical. This would change lots of timelines and would probably answer a lot of questions that we have about how Christopher Columbus found people here when he got here. So world history would change a lot. Why do you think the salt was so valuable across Africa and the world? So we all know that salt is not only something that we use to season our food, but it is also used to preserve food. Like in Jamaican cultures, we eat salt fish. It's salted codfish. So what that means is it was a preservative if you didn't have extreme cold to keep your food from spoiling or extreme heat to dry and preserve your food. You could just drop it in salt. And it was also, there was famine of salt in some places. There was less than desirable amounts of salt in some places. So they were able to circulate it, and it eventually became a much valued item in Africa. Why do you think Mansa Musa wanted the whole world to know about the wealth of his empire? How else do you grow your empire? Mansa Musa made his pilgrimage and he didn't travel light. That was the whole point. If you're going to take 60,000 people, it's not for them to be quiet and not tell everyone about how awesome you are and how awesome where you live is. It's like when you're trying to convince your best friend's mom to make her transfer to your school because it's so much better. Like, come join us and come be Islamic and you'll get gold. Like, if you're poor, even if you're not poor and someone is walking and you see 60,000 men following them and you see thousands of caravans, horses, camels, and pots of gold, do they really have to make a convincing argument at that point? But that was the point, to get people to expand their culture, to expand their livelihood, to expand their economy. And I mean, if I had that much money, I'd want everyone to know my name too. Mansa Musa made a huge number of changes to buildings and cities in his empire. Why do you think he did this, and why was it important? I personally think he did it, once again, to expand his economy. He knew if he had the right ingredients, he could make something good. And what he decided was he was going to invest in education. We can go back up and read it together. No, let's scroll down some. Here it is. In Timbuktu, he decided to found the University of Sankore, one of the greatest centers of Islamic learning in the world. So not only did he invest in like the arts, like law, astronomy, and medicine, he wanted people to learn a trade. If you can't use your head, use your hands. And he made sure that people were educated, people were working, and it stabilized his economy. He made a major trading site before he took his pilgrimage. He wanted to improve living conditions in his cities. It was important to him that the people that he served, because he's a leader, the people he served and the people he led lived good and had what they needed. And when he expanded his territory and he allowed people to come in and learn and circulate money and circulate knowledge and bring experiences, it became more of a melting pot than an empire. People came and we started to create diversity and create, intertwining cultures. People from Europe would come to learn about Islam and people would share their experiences and create history. So that's why it's important. People like Mansa Musa literally helped create history. I'm sure many historians went to study at that center. I'm sure many Islamic historians went to study at some of those centers. People began to value medicine and arts and law and democracy, and they came to learn how to run their own villages and how to form their own democracies and how to educate other people. They came to learn how to live. Black people started democracy, they started the foundations of civilization here. So Mansa Musa owned thousands of slaves, and his mines were worked by slaves. This makes him a controversial figure to many. What do you think? So that is left up to you to discuss with your friends or your family members or whoever you're watching with. What do you think? He owned thousands of slaves. He was Black, and that can be controversial. He has this thriving empire, and if you're well paid and you're taken care of, you are able to inherit some of this land, some of this gold. You're partaking in this opportunity. You're educated at these universities. Are you really a slave? Is that a form of indentured servitude? Were there conditions to where they had to work for X amount of time? In return, they would receive land, gold, and be incentivized for their labors? Were they housekeepers? Did women do farming? Did men do hunter and gathering and exchange their services for currency or for gold, for food, whatever the case may be? Were they slaves? Were they servants? Did they just work a job? Was it a 9-to-5 figure? What are the parameters? We don't know. It's left up for discussion. It's left up for imagination, but he may be controversial because they're slaves, or he may not be controversial because maybe they weren't really slaves and they were paid. But comment below your thoughts on Mansa Musa. He is controversial, yes or no? Are they slaves, yes or no? What do you think? Comment below. So that pretty much concludes our story time for this week. Just to go back over some of the pictures, I mean, look at the architecture. Like, Black people are, wow. I mean, this is ancient civilization. Like, wow. His dress probably had 24 karat gold in it. I mean, we created civilization, we created economy, we expanded our territory. We're amazing. So happy Black History Month. Yay. The shortest month of the year. And I hope you guys are all having a great week. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And I can't wait to read with you again next week. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. Happy Black History Month. Wear your mask. And